In this episode, you'll hear Ryan Kinzler, an 8th grade teacher from Pittsburgh, discuss his concerns over blending his traditional curriculum resources, such as the textbook, with high-impact strategies and problem-based lessons. In this discussion, Ryan realizes how to feel confident with the choices he makes in the classroom and how small moves will result in big impact.
This is another Math Mentoring Moment episode where we talk with a member of the Math Moment Maker community who's working through problems of practice, and together we try to brainstorm some possible next steps and strategies to overcome them. John, are you ready to dive in here with our good friend and Academy member, Ryan Kinzler?
Let's do this!
All right. Welcome to the Making Math Moments That Matter podcast. I'm Kyle Pierce.
And I'm John Orr. We are from makemathmoments.com, who together...
with you, the community of math moment makers worldwide who want to build and deliver problem-based math lessons that spark curiosity,
fuel sense-making,
and ignite your teacher moves. Friends, again, we are welcoming another member of the Math Moment Maker community. In particular, it's Ryan Kinzler, who's joined us on a journey in the Make Math Moments Academy and is hopping on the show here today to chat about a problem of practice that I think we've all had. And I think we'd all be lying if it's not something that we're continuously working on, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think Ryan's issue, I guess not his issue, but his problem of practice, like many of us have, is that we see these great strategies, these great high impact strategies from this resource and this resource, and someone shares this one at a conference, or, you get these ideas thrown at you, and it's like, well, how do I do it all? How do I do all these things, but then also bring them into my set timing with my department? We're all moving together at the same pace. So how do I morph those two ideas together? And in this discussion, you're going to hear us talk about that, talk about some small moves, some small decision making that has to happen. And I think you're going to get a lot out of it. So stick around.
Yeah, let's have a look at how we can stay aligned, but still have some differences with our department members. Here is our conversation with Ryan. Hey there, Ryan. Good morning. You're joining us early in the morning here. Thanks for coming on the Making Math Moments That Matter podcast. We love having these mentoring moment episodes where we get to chat with members like yourself from the Math Moment Maker community. How are you doing today? Tell us a little about yourself. Where are you coming from? And what is a little bit of your teaching backstory, just to give some folks some context?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you guys very much for having me. I'm really, really excited for this. I am coming from the suburbs of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So getting ready to start school here. We go back, I believe, on Thursday. The teachers go back, so coming soon. I'm currently teaching 8th grade math. It's my third year in this district. Before that, I taught in a really small district, 7 through 12. So I taught everything. Went from 7th graders one period to 12th graders the next period. So it was pretty fun. And so graduated from Penn State and grew up in the Pittsburgh area my entire life. Really haven't left.
Ryan, how long have you been teaching? You know what? Maybe when I was just pouring my coffee, if everyone just heard that, but maybe when I was doing that, you mentioned that. But how long?
Yeah,
have
John,
you been
you look like a little bit of like stuck a deer in headlights there. You were like, wait a second, we're already moving on here. So
yeah.
No, this is year 7 for me. I will be starting year 7.
Awesome. And it sounded like, you've had a bit of a varied experience. So, in this district for a few years, you had an opportunity to kind of teach a kind of a wide span of grades. Probably a great experience, but probably difficult in the moment, I'm sure, as you're shifting from one to the next, Yes. So probably glad it happened, but maybe happier now that you get to focus in on a specific grade for a little while. Why don't you keep us rolling here from Pittsburgh? There's a question we ask every guest on this episode, and I find, it was interesting because over 100, and now we're over, by the time this goes out, it'll be over 150 episodes. And I find when we ask our guests about their math moment that they remember, it really helps to frame out that context and sort of take us on a bit of a mathematical journey with you, be it always positive from start to finish, or for some people, maybe not starting so positive and sort of, we'll call it a recovering relationship over time. For you, Ryan, what's that math moment that sort of pops out in your mind when we ask you that question?
Yeah, so listening to almost all of your episodes, I haven't quite gotten all of them yet. Definitely thought about this one for a while. I actually have two, and they kind of tie together, if that's
Absolutely.
Okay. So I guess the first one was growing up, I was always really good at math. Looking back, I was definitely a memorizer. I was a very good memorizer. And when I got to calculus my junior year, for the first time in my life, I had absolutely no idea what was going on. And I would come home crying. I would actually have homework. I was completely lost. And one day I got called into the guidance counselor's office. Mind you, I'd never been there in my entire life. So I had no idea what was going on. And I walk in and my guidance counselor's there with my calc teacher and my parents. And they talked me off the ledge, relaxed me. And then I ended up doing fine. And it was at that point that I realized, I knew I wanted to be a math teacher at that point because I finally understood what all my friends felt in math, which was confusion at points. Like I had never felt that before. It was like, oh, I know how to get over that now. So I'd like to be a math teacher as well. So that's the first thing that kind of led me down that path. And then I think something that really, I guess, transformed the way I kind of view how I teach would be in college. I was supposed to take a class, but it conflicted with another class, so I couldn't take it. And my advisor reached out to me and she said, hey, why don't we do an independent study? I said, okay, sure, let's do an independent study. And what we did was we actually dived into a textbook and I took a look at it from a completely different lens from before. And it just really opened my eyes about what they were trying to do, how powerful graphs are. Like at that point, I did not like graphs. And from then on, I love graphs now. So I think those two moments really kind of shaped, what I do and how I do it.
Right. I want to go back to that moment where you were in the guidance counselor's office because I found that very interesting. This being like that was your moment you knew to be a math teacher, and I want. Can you just kind of expand on that just a tiny bit by because I'm curious there. It's like you had such frustration. And then it was like everyone probably said it was like it's okay that it's frustrating, right? Like it's an okay thing. And then you're like, I want to be a math teacher, and you're like, I feel like there's more to that story.
No, yeah. I mean, I guess till that point, I never really understood how everything connected. And when I was forced to take a step back and try to understand what I was doing and how I was doing it, I realized that I could actually get to the why and not just the how all the time. And I think that is the thing that was missing. Like a lot of my friends, they would always say, I don't like math class. I can't do it. I don't know how you do this in your head all the time and don't have any homework. And I was like, well, I get it. And then I started explaining it and doing things at lunch. And I said, all right, I knew I wanted to be a teacher since second grade, but now I know it's going to be a math teacher. Like I know that for a fact.
Something that's interesting to me, and it's interesting because, John, you had a question. I thought you were going to go to the same place I went to in that guidance office. I was anticipating the conversation going very differently because I've heard this conversation happen a lot. And it might not be calculus. It might be, maybe in grade 11 or wherever, where a student goes down to the guidance office, and it's usually not a tire pumper conversation, or at least I shouldn't say usually. Oftentimes it's maybe you're in the wrong course. That's what I was thinking too. Conversation. And, to me, that is that is not a positive, approach. So I'm happy for you that you had this opportunity where, you had support around you to say that, no, you can do this. It's going to take work. It's going to take effort. And in reality, it might even mean that you're going to have to rethink how you thought math was learned, right? Because before, being that memorizer. I had a very similar experience. Mine was in university where this happened, but my conversation was not, "Hey, you've got this." It was, "You're in the wrong program," and that was something that for some might be motivating. That might, be like, "I'll show you," or it could be the opposite where they go, "Oh my gosh, this person knows obviously enough about education, so I should probably follow their advice and sort of just believe that that's true." So I think that's really awesome, and I'm wondering, how does that experience influence who you are as an educator? Clearly, you decided you were going to be a math teacher. Are you seeing that? Is that something you're trying to be intentional about with your students when, they're saying, "I'm not a math person"? They come in, day one, we've all had that student where they come in, they go, "Don't ask me any questions. I'm not a math person," or something. And they're trying to like just set the stage. They want to get it off the table, get it off their chest that this is just how it's going to be. I've got to assume that, that's not going to jive with you in your classroom.
No, no. I think what it did, to be honest with you, is it made me really patient. As far as understanding that, I didn't realize this until 11th grade. And teaching 8th grade, you have to be patient. You have to let them reach those conclusions. Just provide those supports as they're going, but understand that each student's going to kind of reach that at a different point in time. So if I get 2 or 3 students in the first 9 weeks, great, but I might not get all of them. That's okay. Just be patient and persistent with them as far as helping them understand that they can do everything that is set forth in front of them. They just might need to take different approaches, and we haven't found that yet.
Yeah, I want to kind of keep going here, in the sense that you saying that this idea of in grade 11 understanding the why, like that was an important moment for you to become a math teacher. I'm curious, did you from day one, as you're in year 7, but in day 1 of your first year, is that something that's always stuck with you? Like, is it always been like an element that you're going to focus on the why behind things? Like, I only bring that up because you've heard our stories before, is that I was like you, a memorizer, but it was probably not until years later as I was a teacher where I had that epiphany that, hey, I need to think about the why more in the listening more than, say, the teaching and then the mimicking.
I'm going to be honest, no. I think when I first started, I was a little more nervous and I wanted to do how it was done for me. And even though in the back of my head, I'm like, I'm definitely not reaching all these kids. This is how it's done, and I'm going to do it. And I think I have slowly released more and more of that memorization phase behind me and gotten more comfortable trying to get the students to understand. I mean, it's not necessarily the easiest thing to let go all the time because that means you're not in control. But I think it's worthwhile, and I've seen growth, and I always tell my students, I want you to succeed more next year. Like if you're succeeding next year, if that's continuing, then I know that's what I did for you was good. So I know, to answer your question, no, I did not start off with the why.
I think that's so common, and I would have actually been maybe a little shocked. I know that my experience again was maybe a little different, where I had the, hey, you don't know math conversation, and yours was maybe a little bit more productive, and maybe that did that did change your thinking. But I think as soon as you get into that classroom, I think we look around us and, you kind of go like, what's the norm, right? Like it's easy to go with the crowd. So you look kind of around you. If you're in a progressive, school, let's say, or district, you're probably going to approach things a little bit different, or at least try to. But if you come in and, things kind of look the way that, they've always looked in math class as you remember it, then you're like, all right, I guess this is, the way we're going to do it because, again, there's a lot of experience there, and it's hard to go against that when we're coming out and brand new in this profession. So the one thing I will say is just from this conversation so far, I'm hearing a lot of positives going on there. So, like clearly you're reflective as an educator. You're making that progress to try to, help students see the why and understand the why and trying to ensure that all students have an opportunity to succeed. I'm wondering, like what's on your mind right now? What's that problem of practice, that pebble in your shoe that is keeping you up at night? Or maybe it doesn't keep you up at night, but it's the thing that you kind of come back to and, you're just kind of riffing on thinking, hey, I want to do something different here. I want to help solve this problem. What's going on in your math education world right now?
Yeah, so I'm going to try to cut down the words on this because it can get a little wordy here. Essentially, my district was adopting some new texts for 9 through 12. And since we teach algebra and geometry in the middle school, we were involved in that conversation as well. Long story short, COVID ended up pushing that, delaying it. But sitting through the presentations, my head's going, every single one of these is exactly the same. They're just changing a couple words. They're changing, the diagrams are showing you. They're exactly the same. And it got me thinking, like, you have these traditional textbooks, which have good problems in them, but, they lack a little bit more of the why, essentially. You have these more progressive curriculum sort of things like Open Up or Carnegie Learning, something like that, where they're really good, but if you don't follow them to a T, the students can get a little lost. And then you have these online resources, and I could go through a list of people. I mean, you guys, James Tanton, Visual Patterns, Which One Doesn't Belong, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So I guess the question is, how do you infuse all of those things together, especially if the main textbook is that traditional textbook?
Right. So let's think about that traditional textbook, like in the sense of, is it in your district like thou shalt follow the traditional textbook to a T because every other teacher is following it that way? Like I from talking with teachers from doing these interviews over the last few years, we run into situations where it's like that teacher has to follow along with what everyone else is doing, and then like now I have to figure out how to like morph what we're supposed to be doing so that we're all together, and then throw in some lessons here and there of what I know is good. Or is it like the complete opposite, where I have complete flexibility here, and we have this resource, but I know all of these other resources are here, and now I'm wondering, how do I blend them? Like, where do you lie on that, say, spectrum, Ryan?
I hate to tell you in the middle, but
right
in the middle.
Okay.
No, my administration is really good about allowing us to take risks and take chances and do things differently, especially with the pandemic last year and even into this year a little bit. They're really supportive of that. At the same time, though, we kind of have to stay lock and step with other teachers that are teaching the same courses as us. So, I mean, yeah, there's some leeway there, but I also feel the pressure to make sure that I'm staying with the other teachers. And I guess that's the difference. When I was at my 7 through 12 school, I was the only person teaching those classes. So I made all the decisions all the time. And now, you want to make sure you're staying with the other teachers. You don't want to have this completely different experience. And then parents are calling the school saying, well, why is this kid doing it this way? And their friends in another class are doing completely different
so
stuff.
It sounds like, alignment is, a concern. But I wonder, because alignment, there's many different ways. Like when you say you want to stay with them, are you thinking in terms of pacing? Are you thinking in terms of, is it the approach, or, what homework looks like or doesn't look like, or is it maybe a bunch of those mixed together? Like if we were to dig together, like what's the thing that maybe concerns you the most when you say staying with them, just so that we get a sense as to like where that pebble really is?
Sure. I would say the order of the topics that are presented. I would say that's
Right.
the biggest thing. I just, there's certain benchmarks at certain times of the year that you're like, hey, we should all be here. We should all be here. And, sometimes like
Right.
if my class is, the way they're viewing something, it might be more beneficial right now with this particular group of students to tackle another topic and then circle back. Like, I feel almost as if that wouldn't necessarily always jive.
Or yeah.
Right. And it is, yeah, I was just going to say, like, that's always a concern, but I guess I'm wondering, is that concern there because there are, set standardized assessments that you're going to, like, hey, everyone's going to take this test at, this marker in the course, and we have to know where everyone is? Or is it open and it's more of like your pressure yourself that you're like, I need to be with them because they're going to judge or the parents are going to call, but there's nothing like thou shalt make sure we do well on this test at this time?
I would say there's definitely more pressure that I'm putting on myself. But as far as standardized things, the only things that are standardized 100% would be like a midterm and a final. That's it.
Right. So if let's say that midterm, so it sounds like at least from a midterm perspective, there would be certain things by the middle, that you want students to have a decent grasp on, so you wouldn't be able to, let's say, put off an entire concept to the second half, if,
Right.
So there sounds like a bit of system pacing going on there, which again sounds like, you can make sure that happens. But I definitely, how many other educators are there that you're kind of working with? And the reason I ask is like, if there's like 4 educators and they're all kind of following the exact same order and you're the only, one that's kind of going off over here, you definitely, I totally know that it's so much easier to go with the group, right? And then that way you kind of all can protect each other. You have a reason. We have a collaborative reason or a joint reason why we do things the way we do. As soon as you stray, if something doesn't go as planned, then it's easy to place blame on something without necessarily it being the reason, without causation, right? We tend to say, well, Ryan did it different and this happened, so it must be because you didn't follow everybody else, right? Like, tell us a little bit more about that in terms of like, the logistics of maybe your department and, sort of those concerns that might cause you a little bit of stress.
No, I think at least in the middle school, there's actually 4 of us in 8th grade. So funny that you threw out the number, but I think we all work really well together, and I think we all each have different styles. But at the same time, I don't know how to phrase this. I guess we all have different approaches, but we kind of make sure that we are still lock and step. It's just how we get to that lock and step is all different from the 4 of us. No, but they're great. I mean, they're very supportive, and we bounce ideas off each other all the time. So I don't think it's necessarily the fear of not being 100% lock and step with them. It's going that complete rogue, different way of teaching, I guess.
Right. Now, because like you obviously know, you've mentioned resources, here and some online resources and it's year 7 for you. So like, I'm wondering, what have you done up to now to like blend? Like, you've obviously had blended some already because you probably use this lesson and use this, but then there's the old textbook and what does that look like for you? Like you're saying your department is pretty supportive in what you're doing because you have a different style than somebody else. Sounds a lot like my department where we all have different styles and are okay with that. What have you done so far to blend resources?
Well, it's kind of like a year by year. I keep adding a little bit more stuff every year. When I first moved into this district is when I started using the vertical non-permanent surfaces, and I started doing visual random groupings. Uh, I like during the openings of class, I guess, is a lot of times when I'll pull in like the visual patterns or the which one doesn't belongs or stuff like that as I don't want to say necessarily a warm up, but kind of a warm up, just like to get them engaged, get them. It's not always something that's 100% curricular, I guess, to use that
or
word.
Connected to that day's learning goal, maybe,
Right. It's more of get you thinking, get you up, get you moving sort of thing. And then I as far as the actual instructional after that gets going portion, I almost feel like I revert back to more a guided practice sort of thing, if that makes sense. And I'm trying to get myself out of that, especially because I read Peter Lojal's Thinking Classrooms book. I loved it, like 100% loved it. I'm trying to get myself out of that, being 100% guiding you through everything. But I feel as though that's still the Achilles heel. It's almost like all this fun stuff is at the beginning, and then I kind of let it slide when we get to the meat of it.
Yeah. And I think that's really common. I think, and again, this is not suggesting that doing that warm up to kind of get students engaged, get them to lean in. These are things that we do often. Sometimes it's nice as well, even from like a spiraling approach to intentionally make it not connected. I would say I don't want to always do that. Maybe keeping sometimes it's connected, sometimes it's not, can be really good. I think it shifts gears. So those are all really good things. And then it sounds like, we've got a couple ideas here where, you want to keep some sort of alignment in terms of topics. So, that's one thing. But then it sounds like you've got a little bit of at least freedom from a departmental standpoint where the department members seem to be pretty supportive. And I think it's really good as when departments do have different styles. Like I know John talks about his department a lot and says, like everybody does have kind of their own style. And in a lot of ways, there's like a lot of benefit to that as well. And it sounds like you've got sort of a good thing going on that way that, if a student has Ryan one year and then they have, one of your other department members the next year, they're going to gain different things. They're going to benefit in different ways because of those different approaches. So there's a lot of benefit to that. And it's great to hear that you've got a lot of that support. I'm wondering, and, I have some ideas. I know John's going to have some ideas as well for you to just think on. I'm wondering, what's holding you back from when you get to that lesson part? And I'm going to throw out some ideas as to maybe what they might be. But, part of me, I know I would get stuck in, you had mentioned this earlier, Ryan, when you sort of said like, you started kind of doing it the way everybody always has done it. And it sounds like you've got a bit of this, I guess, challenge, worry that if you do change the lesson structure too much, that like maybe the risk is too high. Like you had mentioned earlier, like, that sometimes some students aren't benefiting, but you do know that there is a chunk of students who are, right? Like, the way math has traditionally been taught in a gradual release of responsibility model, you are getting a good chunk of students, but there's that chunk that we're not, and that percentage varies. So what, if you were to dig deep, like what is truly holding you back? Because it sounds like your department members aren't going to call you out on it and go like, whoa, Ryan, why did you switch up your lesson style? It sounds like there's something there, but what do you feel it is? Is it the worry that like you're going to do these lessons and then find out 3 weeks from now that you're like, oh shoot, none of it worked? Like I know that was a fear of mine. Like what is your true worry here? If we can dig on that and maybe we can get a plan on how we might slowly unfold that idea.
Well, I hope that something will work. I hope that none of it's going to work. No, I think the biggest thing is come back to that pacing idea. So, like for instance, if we're talking about functions, and I take longer on that portion, am I not going to reach something else that I need to for them later in the year, essentially?
Gotcha.
And I know that sometimes if you go slower at the beginning and make sure they understand, it could help you in the long run. But there's also that fear of, oh, there's only 80 days left. I need to make sure I get through all this stuff still. And it's going to definitely be on the final work, going to be on the state assessment. And I feel the pressure to make sure that occurs.
Right. I definitely hear that. And I think that is a common concern with every teacher, because this is the common question is that I want to teach differently, but how do I know I'm going to cover everything? Right. And I feel like, how do we ensure that? Right. It's like, I need to ensure that I covered everything. Now, Ryan, can you ensure that everybody learned everything when you taught it last year?
I would certainly hope so, but probably not.
Not willing to put money on it.
No,
exactly.
No, I would not.
Yeah. It's like, I feel like sometimes this is something we've learned from talking with teachers and over the few years now is that I feel like we definitely have this, like, I got to cover it. But when, like, what is covering it, right? Like, is it just like presenting it to kids and say, hey, there, I did it because I squeezed it in, right? Like, I taught it in this, this quick way because I needed to get it in there and squeeze it in. But it's like, did anybody actually do this well? And it's like, how do I balance where kids need to spend time over here versus over here? Like I think when I think about the covering, it's like, yes, I want to make sure my long range plans hit all major topics, but can I ensure that everybody is going to learn them as deeply as I want? And I don't think we can ensure that. And I think that, I think it's really important that we do plan those long-term goals so that you're like, okay, look I've got this much time to cover all of these things. But then it's like, okay, now I gotta break that down a little bit more, and I gotta break that down. That's what textbooks do, right? Like, textbooks do that already for you by saying, like, chapter 1 is this, and it's 6 sections long because it's going to take you 6 days. And then, in this one's, the next chapter is like, that if you follow a textbook, you're going to meet and cover all of those expectations. And so if you're modifying that textbook and going off that book, it's like, well, how do I make sure that I cover everything? And I think still we have to do some planning of, like, I've got my long range plans, I've got my short range plans, I want to teach this way, but I think, and this is something I think when we went to completely problem-based lessons approach early, a number of years ago, was like, we like, okay, I'm going to spend a couple days here. And then it's like, okay, wait, now I have to, we need to, like, talk about this idea, but I didn't really have enough time here. It's like, I think a lot of teachers and especially us, we get caught up in, like, I really want that awesome activity to run, but we need to also remember what is the learning goal of the day. And I think when I always came back to that moment, it's like, I'm planning out my long range plans, I'm planning out my short range plans, I'm planning out my day plans. I still, the forefront of the day plan is like, today, the learning goal is this. And what best activity helps me get that learning goal out to the student? And tomorrow might be an extension of that learning goal, but I think we still have to make those short range plans to meet the learning goal. And then once you have the learning goal, like, that's the day for that learning goal. Not to say that tomorrow we might have to pivot and keep going with that learning goal. But I think we still need to, like, map out where those learning goals are going to show up. Kyle, what are you thinking here?
I'm right on with you there, John. And I know too, like, the other thing, and you'd mentioned this briefly earlier, Ryan, about this sort of like this in the middle aspect of, like, traditional sort of textbook, something, web-based, or like a more progressive maybe curriculum. You had mentioned, like, Open Up Math, I think it was. when I look at that, and I'm going to go to the textbook because, that's where I sort of began my journey. That's where many of us begin our journey. And oftentimes that's where a lot of us stay for a long time. And it doesn't have to be bad to do that. But one negative drawback that comes out from textbooks that sometimes we miss and it gets overlooked is that a textbook company typically is designing the textbook to hit everything as much as they can in a specific curriculum. And they also try to do it in a way that it will be used in more than one place. So, for example, here in Ontario, we have our own curriculum. They'll design the textbook. It's not like just an Ontario textbook. They'll do like the Ontario edition and maybe like do a little bit of add, a little bit of subtract. But oftentimes it's cheaper for them to produce more than what's needed in order to sort of like cover their bases. And this is good, but it can also be really bad. And what I found myself doing a lot was, all right, well, chapter 3 is this. So I would do all of chapter 3, trusting that that was going to sort of do what I needed it to do. But then later I would look at the curriculum and realize, wow, there was like half of that textbook chapter. While it's good math, it's never bad to explore math that, isn't in the curriculum. I spent a lot of time doing that, and I was trying to like hit all of those things. So I think about solving equations. It was like, we do this many examples to make sure they saw an example of every possibility. Whereas now we start to realize that we're like, wait a second. If I'm introducing solving equations, how do I do it in a way that doesn't necessarily cover every scenario, but gets students reasoning? So this less is more approach where they have to reason through a problem, and then it gives me the opportunity to give them the special case to work through and reason through that. And even if, let's say, we don't cover all of these different special cases, it's sort of like you're building this ability for students to be able to reason their way out of that special case if and when it arises, because they're not just relying on mimicking what John or I did up on the board or what Mr. Kinzler put up on the board. So, this is something that I think takes a lot of time and effort to kind of work through, but it's almost like, if you were to stick, let's say, with the same pacing guide as your colleagues, but you were to take, let's say, tomorrow's lesson and you were to look at that and kind of go, let's say students could only take away like one big thing tomorrow, right? And I'm not suggesting that we don't try to hit more of these ideas, but like, what's the big thing I'm hoping that every student will at least get a good chunk of? It's not always going to happen, like you're going to do it and some days it's not going to happen, but you're looking at that and you go like, why am I doing this in the first place? What am I hoping that they'll have and that they'll take with them? And then when they get to that midterm or that final, that like, if they were to be given something like this, do I have confidence that the strategies and models that they've been able to develop over time will be the tools that they can rely on, rather than it being, let's say, how much they crammed the night before? Because like, that's who I was. It sounds like, Ryan, that's who you were as a student, right? Like, all right, well, day before the test, crank out a bunch of problems. It's like, I know all the big red boxes from the notes and I'm good to go. But imagine if we just had this ability to like walk into an assessment and go, all right, the question's asking me this because I understand what it's saying to me, that I could actually like reason my way through this and come up with a reasonable solution based on that. So we said a lot there. Like, I'm wondering, like, what's popping in your mind now? Maybe it's more questions or wonders or concerns. Where are you at there, Ryan?
No, I enjoyed listening to that. I think that something that I'm learning just by listening to you guys, I focus so much on the long-term goals and not necessarily even just in my class, just making sure they're ready for future classes, that sometimes I lose sight of what do I want you to leave today with? And sometimes that can help identify that, oh, I'm actually hitting more than I think I'm hitting. And I'm covering everything. It's just that you get tied into, I need to make sure I cover every single little tiny thing, whereas that might not always be the case. And I think the other thing that I'm kind of hearing is sometimes I try to take every single good idea I see and put it into my classroom.
Right.
And it's probably not feasible, but I'm going to keep trying and trying and trying. And sometimes you just got to step back and say, all right, I'm going to try this one this year. And if I like it, keep it. And if I don't like it, or if it didn't work, either tweak it or try something different. And that's why there's all these different things out there. So because they're all going to fit your different styles. And I think Kyle, you brought up the fact that the textbooks, it's a mass audience that it reaches and not necessarily your target one. And I think that, we can bank these ideas that are online. And maybe this year's class needs A, B, and C. The next year's class needs C, D, and G. And it's okay not to do the exact same thing every year. So you can still hit, the different strategies that you're seeing online, but different ways and different approaches with different years of students.
I think you've nailed some of the big ideas. I think you've been struggling with right here is that we don't have to, like, I think the other thing I was imagining is that a lot of us get caught up in I see this, I want to do that, I want to do that, I want to do that, and then don't realize that, say, that teacher or those group of teachers that I'm seeing that are sharing these resources have also, minutely change their lessons over years, right? And it's like, I want that, but it takes time to like have that on a regular basis. So for example, you read Peter's book and you're like, I want vertical non-permanent surfaces. But it was like when we, first stumbled across Peter a couple of years ago, we were like, we're going to change this one part of this one lesson and we're going to see how that goes. And hey, that actually it produced these results and we had this kind of engagement and we had this kind of thinking happening. I wonder if I can do that, not tomorrow, because tomorrow we're doing this other thing, but maybe I can do that in that lesson down the road with that style. It's like, I think we get caught up on seeing a lot of stuff and trying to fit it all in, but realize that, hey, we're going to get there eventually, and it might take a couple years to develop this as a program. And I think if you're trying to go blended again, right, like go back to this blending, and especially if you're trying to align with the teachers who are teaching in a different way, but still be in the same spot, it's like, okay, go back to here's my learning goal. What's the best activity here? Let me try this activity today and see how that fits. Did I get that learning goal out that day? Because we got to stay on pace, right? So and that's how we did our lessons from a long time ago. Like we morphed by changing one lesson here and seeing how that went. And then tomorrow we went back to this traditional way, but we were like, we knew we were unhappy with it, but we weren't in a position to like change everything all at once because it's just too much. So I feel like you're seeing some of that too.
Yeah. And something as well, like if I was to take this idea that John's sharing, how over time, you can slowly make changes. It could be something as simple as taking that lesson that you would normally do and thinking about what is the question that I could ask students to kind of grapple with first. And it's almost like you're just delaying a little bit of what you'd end up doing anyway. So for example, John and I say it all the time, we would come in, we'd be like, today we're going to learn about this. Here's the definitions, like the definition of the circumference is this, the radius is that. I'd show a we'd try to pre-teach all this stuff. And then I would do a bunch of examples. It's like, imagine if I could just take one of those examples. Doesn't have to be like, something different. It could be one of your examples. And now it's not an example, it's a question about it. And it probably involves a visual of some type. And to get them estimating and, kind of sharing. The other thing that it really helps us do, we always notice this, is that by asking them questions, it's not only helping them with curiosity, but it also helps you get a sense of like, where are they coming at this from? Whereas before, I was just sharing stuff and it was the same thing to every group. Like you had said, like every group's different. Every group needs something a little different. Every student actually needs something different. I know it's hard to, get down to that level of differentiation sometimes, but just taking that and slowly, switching something around. And I might even encourage Ryan, and I know, being a member of the academy and having, spent some time doing some of that learning, if you head over to the problem-based units section, that continues to grow on our site. And, there's lots of problem-based lessons, like pick that topic that you're going to pick. I just threw out circles. Circles has been on my mind a lot lately. You could look at the going in circles unit and sort of go, okay, if I'm going to be exploring area of a circle, what could I throw at students to kind of get them thinking about it? And then it's like I could still be at the end at that consolidation phase. That could be where, I make sure that I've quote unquote covered what I'm feeling concerned I'm not going to cover. We always like to say it's like uncovering the curriculum. That's an Alex Overwick quote that really stuck with John and I early on. And, when we do this, we have to always remember that it's not about loose ends. It's not about like just asking a student a question and hopefully they get it, or some will get it, some won't. We're still at the end. We're going to make sure that we consolidate this together, and we're going to give them some reflection prompts, like practice, that they can actually go and do to make sure that we're not just kind of walking away from this thing as just an activity where kids remember the activity, but who knows who connected to the math. So, it might be a good place to kind of start, and you don't have to necessarily follow the entire problem-based unit, but you might look at that as like maybe inspiration for how you can apply the 3-part framework, because they're all set up in that way. And you can still take some of those resources, your favorite which one doesn't belong, or your, favorite visual pattern, and maybe use that as a guide or a structure to just slowly start making that progression. One thing you can't do is just flick a switch and have it all change overnight. You certainly want to make sure that we're taking those small little changes so that you can feel confident as you go, and you don't, one day wake up in the middle of the year going, uh-oh, I don't know if we're going to make it through as much as I had hoped. We want to make sure that you're sleeping well at night and that you're feeling really good and confident about, the program that you're putting forth.
Yeah, no, I love all those ideas.
Awesome stuff. I'm wondering right now at this time, Ryan, like if you reflect on the conversation we've had here, what would be your biggest takeaway from this conversation? Like maybe like think back to all the, your thinking before, your thinking now, and like maybe part of your big takeaway is like, what's your next step?
Yeah, no, I think the biggest thing is, like how I was saying, I want that switch to just flip. And it's not going to happen. And I need to learn to take like the small successes and take those as wins, and just try to implement little bits instead of every single thing I see. Because even though I like all the things, just because I'm throwing it at the students doesn't necessarily mean it's going to have the desired effect
Absolutely.
that it's designed to have. So, I mean, maybe pare down, like find the 2 or 3 things I really want to try this year, implement those, give it time to actually fail a little bit and build it back up and see what happens, and kind of let my I guess my experience here be the judgment on if it's working or not, and not necessarily feel forced to plow everything into one lesson. I guess that's my biggest takeaway there.
I love it. That's fantastic. And I think that is an amazing takeaway, and something that will hopefully keep you grounded and not overwhelmed. I find educators, especially educators who are reflective and who want to continually grow and learn, tend to get themselves in a scenario where sometimes we can stress ourselves out, by putting too much pressure on ourselves. You had mentioned earlier, that a lot of this is really like sort of self-inflicted, right? Where you're like, I want to be the best educator I can be, so that's why I'm doing all this work, and we want it to happen now, like we don't want to wait. And, we always feel like waiting is sort of, not helping our students as much as we could. So I think in the end, you're really helping your students in the long run by taking those steps in very intentional ways, because you just said it. we could throw all this at students and it might actually have the opposite effect. Maybe the students are overwhelmed or maybe, the intentionality is lost. So I love that. Fantastic. We're so happy that you had the time to come on today with us and chat with us. I'm wondering, is there any place folks can maybe get in touch with you if they are having similar challenges, or maybe somebody out there is looking to buddy up with someone who's also teaching, let's say, in the middle grades, and they want to stay in touch?
Yeah, sure. So my Twitter handle is kind of weird. It's at Crush the Turtle. So it's a Finding Nemo reference. It's a long story. We don't really have time for that one, but you can find me there.
Crush the turtle.
Yeah.
Got it.
That's really all. I'm in the academy as well, but those are the two places really that I'm on social media there.
Fantastic.
Awesome stuff. And also, one thing that we do with many of our Math Moment Maker guests, is it okay if we kind of contact you, check back with you in maybe 6 to 12 months, maybe next year, to see how things have developed, things have changed?
I would absolutely love that.
Fantastic, my friend Ryan. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for taking the time and being vulnerable, opening up some of these challenges that we're all facing. There's a lot of head nodders out there, probably, dealing with a lot of the same challenges and wonders. So thank you for helping to push not only yourself, but the Math Moment Maker community along with you on this journey. And we'll be catching up with you soon in the academy, but then also hopefully here on the podcast in like we said, 9 to 12 months as well.
Sounds great, guys. Thank you.
Awesome.
Have a good one there, Ryan. As always, both John and I learned so much from these Math Mentoring Moment episodes, and we thank you, the Math Moment Maker community, for always reaching out to hop on the show with us and get vulnerable. If you would like to join us on a future Make Math Moments mentoring episode, head on over to makemathmoments.com/mentor, and you can apply today. That's makemathmoments.com/mentor.
Right. Awesome stuff there, Kyle. In order to ensure you don't miss out on new episodes as they come out each week, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, whichever that one happens to be, Apple or Spotify. Kyle, I've actually just made the switch to Spotify.
You're making the switch, eh? Making the switch.
I did.
I love it.
I'm listening. I just stopped all the subscriptions on Apple, and I just moved right over to Spotify.
Wow.
I'm now listening to all my podcasts on
The
Spotify.
flippening is officially happening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Also, we're on YouTube. Hit that notification bell, and we will see you in our next episode. John, where do we find those show notes?
Show notes and links to resources from this episode, plus complete transcripts that you can read right on the web, is on makemathmoments.com/episode 155. Make Math Moments. That's makemathmoments.com/episode 155.
Well, until next time, my friends, I'm Kyle Pierce.
And I'm John Owen.
And that was Landon just yelling in the background, if you heard him. High fives for us.
And a high five for you.